Our next speaker is Zigon Zhu. Hopefully I pronounced it right. And he'll be talking about the primary and albedo protons measured by the Chang'e lunar lander neutron and dosimeter experiment on the lunar far side.
Thanks for giving me the chance to show my studies. So after listening to so many talk about the low energy or the micro energy environment, now we turn to the high energy environment. Now I would like to give introduce of the primary or albedo proton that's measured by LND on the lunar far side surface. So as we know that the lunar, there's no atmosphere on the lunar surface, so and the lunar surface is exposed to the deep space directly, so the high energy particles could interact with the surface directly and generate a considerable radiation dose. So this is very important, and we need to consider. So just as I said, the primary particle I mentioned here is mainly the primary protons, meaning the galactic cosmic ray that's coming from outside of solar system. It's very high energy, and when it's coming to the lunar surface, it could interact with the lunar regulus, and then generated the protons, secondary protons, and subatom like neutrons. And after that, this subatom protons, neutrons could travel or collide with the particles inside of the lunar regulus and generate and travel and penetrating the lunar regulus and moving upward, then becoming the albedo proton that I mentioned here on the lunar surface. So here, this is not only the protons, but also the albedo neutrons that is generated in such a way. Such particles, including the electrons and the protons, are very high, quite high energy. For protons that have like more than 15 MeVs, these particles are enough to penetrate in spacesuit or the space instrument. So it's already high energy enough to penetrating and cause damage. So definitely we should make sure to monitor them and know how they affect the lunar surface environment. And at the same time, the interaction of albedo protons with the lunar regulus could kindly reflect the distribution of hydrogen nuclei on the lunar regulus. So this potentially could be a way to detect the water components. So the measurements I mentioned here is mainly measured by the instrument called the Lunar Lander Neutron and Dosimetry, which I call LND. This instrument is on board the Chang'e 4 mission, which is the first human mission that soft landed on the lunar far side. The landing location is the Von Karman crater in the South Pole. And this instrument started working from 2019 January 3rd, and it's continuing working to now. Since this instrument is only working on the lunar far side, and on the lunar far side there's a daytime and nighttime. So during nighttime, the instrument is switched off to survive the frozen temperature, and so the instrument only monitor working during the lunar daytimes, which means for one Earth month, there are only about 13 days that's working on the lunar far side. The initial idea of this instrument is it's a radiation monitor, but it's also a charged particle and a neutron monitors. Now we look at this instrument structure. So in the sensor head, this instrument has 10 silicon detector, 500 micrometer, just arranged like this. But inside of these detectors, we have three different observer layers that could use to detect neutron monitors, which is not the case for this for this study, but the radiation or the neutron monitor research first published in the first result in SAT1 2020. And for the charged particles, we manually separate two types. One is a stopping particle that's penetrating A and stopping in the other detectors. So we use dE over dx technique to tear apart different particles. So and for the penetrating particles, which means this particle have higher energies that could penetrating all the detectors. Yeah. And consider, but for the particles from above, consider the structure that's surrounding the sensor head. We have a actual shielding that's we estimate by when we simulate the response. So we need to consider shielding. So here is the main data product of the LND, which I will call action plot. Here, if you want to find the whole, the complete action plot, you should refer to instrument paper. But here I just showed the part of them, which I mainly split them to a stopping particle and a penetrating particle. And since we only focus on the protons, I just mark out this proton data products. So here, for the stopping particles, we measure the protons with energy from around 8 to 35 MeV. And in the penetrating part, we also measure these protons. For example, here in this box, we also measure the penetrating proton that's energy above 35 MeV. And of note is that this branch is helium-4, which is penetrating helium-4. And here is the upward proton that's moving in this region. Here is the response of primary protons and albedo protons. In the albedo protons, we only, due to the limited channels, we only give one channel for the albedo protons. So it's about 35 and 76 MeV albedo protons. After we get the data, we need to consider the calibration, purple calibration. So here is the two effects that we consider for the primary and albedo protons. For the primary, we have some contamination by the heavy ions, which is confirmed by the simulation because the heavy ions could interact with the body and generate secondary particles. So we use a simulation to subtract this contamination in our final spectrum. And in the albedo protons, we have we plot the pixel distribution or to the histogram distribution along this y-axis, and we find that here this arrow point out the region of the albedo protons. So you can find that their background that we could model with the Gaussian function. So we just manually subtract this background and derive the albedo proton flux. And then after I apply this method, we finally get such a final result of the albedo protons and the primary protons and its comparison with the models. So first, sorry?
1 minute left.
Okay. First is this is the primary protons that measured by ND, and this is well. And the thing is, this is quite agree with the other instruments called Soho even, which I didn't print here, but compared to the model, I find a quite clear difference between the model and the instrument. Apart from that is another column is the albedo protons. This one measured by ND, and there's another data point that I estimate based on the result from Creature 2012 results according to the ratio to calculate the flux, and these both show fit quite well with the simulation, that is this shadow area, which is use the model from which called Red Moon, which Dobynde has told in the last section. And in the last is the ratio compression. So in the simulation, we get such a ratio albedo to primary ratio that's changed over time, and this LND measurement ratio and the crater merit ratio is quite agree well with the simulation. So now, yeah, it's quite quick. I'm sorry for the time, but here's a quick summary. So in this study, we first report the LND proton spectrum during quiet time, and it's agreeing well with the so even and the JCR model might underestimate the proton flux during solar minima. And the average upward proton flux between 65 to 76 MeV during the solar minima is quite agree well with the measurement, it's a crater measurement and the simulation from a Reed-Moore model. And these results show the capability of LND to carry on the study of the lunar radiation environment, which is an important factor for future robotic and human exploration on the moon. So yeah, that's all. If you have any questions, please just contact me via email or just ask me.